If you build it, they may come. The key vote for a Christian resort project in Mission Valley.
I think it's just because the weed makes me feel so much more relaxed and I don't feel rushed.
Buzzed driving is dangerous driving.
Calling for new rules of the road in California and the legal limit for buzz driving. Finding homes and help for these cute faces. The San Diego agency that's cutting back on volunteers. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The massive cross-border sewage flow that polluted the Tijuana River Valley and coastal waters may turn into legal action. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Millions of gallons of sewage washed through the ecologically sensitive river valley just north of the U.S.-Mexico border this past winter. It was a situation that roiled local residents who complained about the stench and the health risks created by the cross-border flows. San Diego City Council member David Alvarez says the city is considering taking the federal government to court in an effort to fix the problem.
Clearly, this is a federal responsibility, and they need to just start taking action. And if we have to go to the courts to make that happen, we're looking at that as an option. We got to put everything on the table because this has just been for too long, and it's only getting worse.
Imperial Beach Mayor Serge Dedina says he's also considering moving the dispute into a courtroom. He says the International Boundary and Water Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and State Regional Water Quality Control Board have all fallen down on the job. Dedina says there must be an end to the lawless environment along the border that allows rogue sewage spills to continue to pollute the U.S. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The city of San Diego has released appraisals for the Qualcomm Stadium property. The assessments value the entire site, including the nearby practice facility, at about $110 million. This is higher than previous estimates and could have an effect on the Soccer City proposal. The appraisal means the city could charge $11 million a year in lease payments for the land. That's more than Soccer City backers were expecting. The city hopes to shutter the money-losing stadium at the end of the 2018 college football season. San Diego-based televangelist Morris Cerullo is planning a big new development in Mission Valley. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the project faces a critical vote tomorrow.
Morris Cerullo is something of an international celebrity in the evangelical Christian community, but he's mostly kept a low profile here in San Diego. That would change if his plans for a Christian tourist resort in Mission Valley are approved. Cerullo's ministry owns the property that currently houses the Mission Valley Resort Hotel and a liquor store. It's about 18 acres on Hotel Circle South and contains some vacant storefronts. Cerullo would tear all that down to build his so-called legacy center. It would include a luxury hotel, a restaurant, a theater, and a sort of missionary training center. Over the past year, the project has undergone a major redesign. The style is now more modern and its size is smaller. That's meant some of the worst impacts on traffic in the area are no longer a concern for the city. The San Diego Planning Commission on Thursday will vote on whether to recommend the project be approved. The final decision will be made by the City Council, likely sometime this summer. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Two House Democrats are launching a long-shot bid to impeach President Donald Trump. The effort by California Representative Brad Sherman and Al Green of Texas has little chance of success in the Republican-led House. The lawmakers say Trump obstructed justice when he fired a former FBI Director James Comey. Other Democrats say they want to see the outcome of the investigation before deciding on whether to impeach the president. Former FBI Director James Comey shared more details about his conversations with President Trump today, including the president's thoughts on how the FBI Russia investigation was creating a cloud over his presidency. It's all part of Comey's prepared testimony. It was submitted ahead of tomorrow's appearance before the Senate Intelligence Committee. The remarks show Comey will testify President Trump sought his loyalty. And the president also asked what could be done to lift the cloud of the investigation shadowing his administration. U.S. intelligence chiefs refused to describe their conversations with the president today.
I also am not going to comment on any conversations I may have had or notes taken or not taken relative to the Russia investigation.
And likewise, I'd take the same position.
Did Director Comey ever share details of his conversations with the president with you? In particular, did Director Comey say that the president had asked for his loyalty?
I'm not going to comment on those conversations.
Why not?
Because for two reasons. First, as I mentioned, I'm not in a position to talk about conversations that Director Comey may or may not have had with the president.
I'm not asking.
You can watch Comey's testimony tomorrow morning. PBS NewsHour will have live coverage starting at 7 on KPBS 2. You can find complete channel listings on kpbs.org. San Diego scientists say they're closer than ever to developing a vaccine for heroin. And KPBS science reporter David Wagner has details.
Cocaine and nicotine and methamphetamine.
Scripps Research Institute scientist Kim Janda says the vaccine works by teaching the immune system to recognize heroin. Antibodies can then stop it from entering the brain and giving addicts the high they crave. A new study proves the vaccine to be effective in monkeys for many months. Janda says the next step will be to prepare for human trials.
So a lot of times what addicts do is they just want a little taste, and that escalates. And so what the vaccine will do is will stop that. And so they can continue on with the program of trying to stay sober and, kick the habit, so to say.
The vaccine is designed to block heroin, but not other opiates like fentanyl or prescription pain drugs. Still, Janda says this could be a powerful weapon in the fight against America's heroin crisis. David Wagner, KPBS News.
Retail sales of marijuana are set to begin next year. Some fear more stoned drivers on the road will lead to more car crashes. And California has a legal limit for alcohol intoxication, but not for marijuana. In this final part of our three-part series on drug driving, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg tells us what's being done.
The National Traffic Highway Safety Administration says on Friday and Saturday nights, 1 out of 5 drivers has a drug other than alcohol in their system. The agency says the drug that saw the biggest increase between 2007 and 2014 was marijuana. The National Institute on Drug Abuse says after alcohol, marijuana is the drug most commonly involved in crashes. Even so, some argue marijuana doesn't necessarily make a driver unsafe. Like this San Diego woman. She asked us not to use her name because she doesn't want her boss to know she smokes pot. The woman says marijuana makes her a better driver.
I think it's just because the weed makes me feel so much more relaxed and I don't feel rushed. Because most of the time I feel rushed just because of the nature of my job. But when I'm smoking weed, I can go whatever pace I want to.
But others could smoke the same amount of pot as this woman and feel totally out of it. So where do we draw the line? Researchers at UC San Diego are trying to find out.
So this is the room where we do the driving simulations. We have our participants sit here in this seat and go through a fully interactive driving simulation.
Tom Marcotte is the co-director of UCSD's Center for Cannabis Research. He's involved in a state-funded study that aims to establish when a person is too stoned to drive. People in the study are being given different amounts of pot of varying strengths and then asked to take a spin in the simulator.
We have things where people need to make left-hand turns across oncoming traffic, which requires judgment of time and distance and all of that. And if you go too fast, you'll squeal tires, and if you go too slow, you may be in an accident.
Move to the far right lane and take the freeway exit.
Researchers will be testing participants immediately after they smoke, and then hours later to see how impairment changes over time. Dr. Igor Grant is director of the Center for Cannabis Research.
We're, monitoring blood levels, saliva levels, expired breath, all those kinds of things. And using, not only driving, but other kinds of cognitive tests to see how impaired a person really is. I think based on that, maybe we can develop a better indicator of impairment.
The study is just getting underway, so it will be some time before any results are announced. Grant says previous research suggests in modest doses marijuana doesn't greatly increase the risk of accidents. But that's not to say he's encouraging people to drive stoned.
My point is that we don't know the exact criteria to detect intoxication. How long after a person has taken the marijuana are they unsafe to drive? And these are the things we need to answer.
But Scripps Mercy Hospital's Chief of Staff, Michael Seiss, believes any amount of marijuana makes someone unsafe to drive. In his decades of experience as a trauma surgeon, Dr. Seiss has seen too much carnage caused by drug-impaired drivers.
Basically, buzzed driving is dangerous driving. So arguing over amounts right now is probably not the way to think about it. I think all of us should be responsible drivers. Bottom line is, if you're buzzed from whatever, you should not drive.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
And California State University officials want to boost graduation rates at state schools, and lawmakers hope new legislation can help. Currently, about 19% of CSU students graduate within 4 years. Lawmakers say that's dismal and blame a lack of funds for poor academic advising and course availability.
The state has made choices, and I think those choices have not been the best. So that has created pressure to raise tuition because state funding is inadequate. It has made it more difficult for the university to provide the classes kids want to get out efficiently.
The bill is currently in committee. San Diego County Animal Services has cut the amount of volunteers in half, and they're not accepting any new ones. But some of the remaining volunteers say this is leaving animals without enough care. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser has more.
There are currently 450 volunteers spread between the county's 3 shelters. At this time last year, there were 850 volunteers. KPBS asked to talk with the shelter about the change, but were directed instead to a county spokesman for animal services. He said when the shelter had more volunteers, they didn't all necessarily put in enough time. The requirement is 6 hours a week, and that 450 volunteers is, quote, enough to handle the tasks at the shelter. But current and former volunteers at the shelter disagree. They said a lot of tasks go unfilled, including feeding animals, filling their water, cleaning their cages, and taking them out on walks or to play. Claire Tragesser, KPBS News.
Clouds are covering the coast this week. Erin Calandra has tonight's forecast.
A bit cloudy yesterday and also a bit today, maybe breaks of sunshine toward the afternoon, mainly inland. But if we take a look right now at our satellite and radar, we don't really see much of anything going on across the county. So it's pretty quiet as far as precipitation. As we take a wider look, though, here is a front moving in off the coast, and it's bringing some wet weather to our friends to the north of us. Also some cloud coverage. That's going to reach us by the weekend. We'll see the difference in our temperatures here in just a minute. But first of all, for tonight, clouds are going to build and they're going to remain throughout the day tomorrow. We could see some breaks of sunshine, though, later on in the afternoon. 63 degrees for the overnight temperature, and that's really going to be the trend through Sunday. So taking a look at tonight, Borrego Springs, 66 degrees, Ramona, 51, and here along the coast, Oceanside and San Diego, a bit cloudy, 60 degrees in Oceanside, 63 in San Diego. Now, this is our setup for Thursday. We do have a cold front moving in our direction. It gets here this weekend, and with that, we could see even some drizzle or fog, freezing fog in the morning hours, late night into those morning hours here. And again, that continues through Sunday, along with some cloudier conditions than we're used to for this time of year. So Borrego Springs, 101 degrees, Mount Laguna, 72, Alpine, 76, and Poway, 77 degrees there. And as we take a look at later on in the week, the Pacific Northwest and also the Northeast, it's still a bit gloomy and wet, but the central states, very warm, lots of sunshine. Now taking a look at our 5-day, this is where we see that cold front move through. We dip down to 69 degrees Saturday. By Sunday, we're at 68 degrees. With some clouds. Inland, it's a similar story. We drop down from 78 on Friday to 73 Saturday and even to 71 degrees on Sunday. In the mountains, it's a bit chilly, so if you have outdoor plans this weekend, you might need a little sweater or jacket. And in the deserts, we drop from 101 down to 88 degrees by Sunday, so a nice little cool down. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
San Diego first responders say they're ready in the case of a terrorist attack. Today, more than 30 local and federal agencies came together to demonstrate their preparedness. They conducted drills at the San Diego Fire Rescue Training Facility on Harbor Drive. The scenarios included active shooters, dirty bombs, radioactive materials smuggled into the border, and more.
Let's face it, San Diego is vulnerable to a terrorist attack. We're not out to instill fear in individuals, but we do want to demonstrate that this region is prepared like no other region.
The event was organized by San Diego County's Office for Emergency Services and paid for by federal grants. Tonight, a retired admiral who helped lead the Navy's sustainable energy efforts speaks out. KPBS's military reporter Steve Walsh talked to Lynn Herring about the president's decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord and what he thinks the impact might be on the military.
So you deal with issues of climate change. You had a long career in the military where you also dealt with these issues. When you first heard that the president's decision that we were pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, what was your thought?
Not surprised, primarily because that was one of his campaign promises. I was a little shocked that the emboldened nature by which he presented his case showed, from my perspective, an extreme misunderstanding of the entire concept of what the Paris Accord really provides for us as a nation and a globe. And I think that the characterization of his reason was, for all practical purposes, from my perspective, a complete lack of leadership.
I think we think of these issues as really coming to the forefront in the Obama administration, but back in 2005, while you were on active duty, what President Bush gave you the Presidential Award for Leadership in Federal Energy Management were your efforts to basically look at energy management back then in the Navy. Why does the military even care about these issues, and do they?
Well, I think it's important to understand when I was brought here to figure out how to reduce the costs associated with shore infrastructure so that those dollars could actually be sent forward to support the war fighting effort. And from a business perspective, you take a look at your largest cost centers and you begin to focus on those cost centers. Well, guess what the three largest cost centers were? Energy, water, and waste.
So how has the military's view on climate change evolved since back in 2005?
Well, I can say that in 2005 we really weren't talking about climate change as you know it. But I think that what you've seen over the course of time is a realization from a strategic perspective that climate change is real. And it's happening on a global scale, and there are significant impacts to our national security.
All right, so give me a couple of those. What are some of the things that the military, when they think of climate change, what worries them?
One of the best examples is Bangladesh. Within the next 10 years, 30 million refugees will be considered by the UN's condition climate refugees. Bangladesh is sinking, and it will, in its time frame, cause geopolitical instability in the region. We're going to have to figure out how to get there from here. And that's just one example because there are many in the Pacific.
So the military is out there, they're looking at these issues, they're adding up the costs. Does pulling out of Paris, does that make a difference to what the military is doing?
Well, I don't think, as a whole, unfortunately, I think that he thinks that pulling out of Paris will have an effect. The truth of the matter is, we're not in it for the politics of whatever it is he thinks that we're in it for. and the national policies in order to create the strategic planning that occurred over the course of the last 10 years, not 8 years. So we've been doing this for more than 10 years, is still there. It's still present.
But does that change the debate? The big budget coming up here, if you're trying to get money to address some of these issues or to mitigate them, does that make it harder?
It will in some cases make it harder to mitigate.
Is it going to make it very hard to discuss these issues over the next 4 years?
I think it's going to make. I think the great part about this is more than 200 cities signed an accord in Paris. Okay, and San Diego is one of them. Washington, New York, DC. I mean, Boston, San Francisco, Oakland. 200 cities across the country have all signed on to the agreement, and then you've got 193 different countries who are all part of this process. In which, if you take a look at the total, is it going to become harder? I think it's actually going to become a different conversation.
All right. Well, let's end on optimism then. Why not? Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Steve.
It's been nearly a year since 49 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub in Florida. AP reporter Josh Rapogel talks to a survivor dealing with guilt because he lived while his friend died in the club.
I remember this night like it's yesterday. We were going to have margaritas.
He keeps the photos of his friend close.
For me to get him to take a picture was hell.
Demetrius Nollings has been counting the days and minutes since he lost his best friend. Eddie Justice was one of the 49 killed in the Pulse massacre last June.
I'm never going to get to hear him say, oh, come over and let's go out to eat, or let's go to the club, or let's go just do anything, or even a phone call. And I try not to get like this because I think I'm supposed to be strong.
Nollings managed to escape the nightclub as the shooter indiscriminately fired bullets. Justice was trapped and begged his friend to help him. We spoke to Nollings after the shooting.
He said, I've been shot, and I said, I love you. And he said, help me. Help me. I lost him.
A year later, Nollings struggles to hide the emotional scars.
I'm putting a smile on my face. And I think if you put a smile on your face, then people don't know how much pain you're really going through.
The pain Nollings talks about is felt far and wide. Angels stand guard on what the nightclub owner calls sacred ground. Visitors leave kind words.
I feel like it just happened just today, so we still think he's going to walk through the door.
Family members of victims visit the place where their children were taken, still in disbelief.
He was a good son, and the feeling will never go away.
Feelings are hard for Nollings. The hardest, regret.
I hope he knows that I would have done anything to change it and that I didn't leave him. I wish we would have never went out. And I wish this wouldn't happen. And one day I'm gonna get to a place where I won't beat myself up.
This place will become a permanent memorial.
To announce the establishment and activation of the One Pulse Foundation.
The owner of Pulse announcing the community will help design it.
This is for them. It needs to be by them. They are part of this process if they're able to.
So the 49 victims will never be forgotten. Joshua Plogel, The Associated Press, Orlando.
An architect whose mid-century homes and buildings shaped many Southern California neighborhoods has died. William Kreisel built about 30,000 homes in Southern California, including here in San Diego. And in Palm Springs, Kreisel's had a talent for translating modern architecture ideas of the 1950s and 60s into mass-produced tract homes. They were open plan, full of light, with simple styling. He was 92 years old. Coming up tonight on PBS NewsHour, the recent attack on London is affecting how people in the UK are voting.
For the last couple of weeks after the terrorist attacks in Manchester and London, security's gone up in my own agenda as far as who I'm going to vote for. And I think a lot of people are now looking, all right, well, who's best going to deliver security?
Plus how the ISIS attack on Iran may escalate regional conflict. That's tonight on PBS NewsHour, starting at 7, right here on KPBS. There was some fishy business happening in the state capitol. It involved sticky rice and raw meat. Lawmakers battled for this year's sushi roll competition, an annual celebration for California's rice crop that rakes in over $5 million a year. Legislators rolled up their sleeves and got down to business.
You want to make it tight, and then it's not as tight as you want, and then you want to cut it, and you whip the knife, and it doesn't cut all the way through. So, it's frustrating. So sushi chefs are amazing. I will give them respect.
His strategy worked. He took home this year's title. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, get ready for Film Out. San Diego's LGBT Film Festival starts this weekend. And on Midday Edition, the story of a young Marine and her bond with her four-legged partner on the field. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/Evening Edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.